Welcome to another episode of Phrengineering Labs. Today, we're talking about phone phreaking. So back in the day, the automated phone switching system used in-band signaling, and what this meant was that the signals that the different parts of the telephone network would send to each other as control signals were sent over the same line that your voice was sent over when you made a phone call. This meant two things. One, you could usually hear the signaling that was taking place, and two, if you played those signals into your handset from your home, then you could actually control parts of the telephone network yourself, essentially hacking the automated switching system. These early telephone hackers were called phone phreaks, and they used devices called BlueBoxes to wreak absolute havoc on the phone systems in the 60s all the way up through the 80s. A BlueBox is a device with a keypad, just like a normal phone, except instead of dialing DTMF tones or dual tone multi-frequency tones, the stuff you hear when you dial a phone number now, it plays what are known as EMF tones or multi-frequency tones. Multi-frequency tones were used by the phone company to control automated switching equipment. Now, you could get the frequencies for these tones if you really dug for them, and once you had the frequencies, then you could build a circuit to generate those frequencies. And it turns out if you could generate those frequencies, then, well, you had basically all the same powers that the phone company had over their network. The most common use for the BlueBox was to get free long-distance calls. This sounds ridiculous today when unlimited free long distance is part of almost every telephone plan, but back in the day, long-distance calls were expensive. I'm talking anything from $5 to $25 a minute, so getting a free one was, well, pretty cool. But it turns out there were certain free long-distance numbers to begin with. The phone company wouldn't charge you, for instance, if you called directory assistance, even if it was in another area code. So if you called directory assistance in another area code, you were making a free long-distance call, it just wasn't a very interesting one. So what if they gave you that long distance line and then you could make the directory assistance people hang up? Then you would be on a long distance line and no one would be charging you for it. From there, you could probably dial out to another number, right? But how do you make them hang up? You can't just call directory assistance and say, "Would you hang up, please?" Well, it turns out that when no one was on a long distance line, there was a supervisory tone that would play. This is how the phone system knew that the line wasn't in use. That tone was 2600 hertz. If you played that on our long distance call to directory assistance, they would hang up. It's not that they would hang up, they would be hung up. See, what happens is that when you play the 2600 hertz tone, the phone system thinks that you've hung up because the line went back to the supervisory frequency. See, it thinks that your circuit is sending the 2600 hertz tone because it noticed that your phone is off the hook. So the other end of the line responds by hanging up in turn. Now, once they've hung up, you're still there because remember, you didn't actually hang up your phone, you just played the supervisory signal over the line. Now you're on what's called a trunk line, and there's nothing on the other end. How do you dial out from that line? Well, that's when you get out your multi-frequency tones, starting with a key pulse, then your number, and then start. And your call would be connected, and you would still be charged as if you were on the line with directory assistance, a big fat $0 per minute. Now, as you can imagine, there were other things you could do with a BlueBox besides just make free long-distance calls. It turns out if you could dial multi-frequency tones, then you could also get to parts of the telephone system that usually only phone network employees like linemen could get to. A lot of them were test numbers for various things, frequency sweeps, echo lines, all sorts of crazy diagnostic lines set up by the phone company in order to test phones. It turns out there were other tones that the phone company used in other places, and so just a BlueBox wasn't really enough equipment to get the job done. There were other boxes that were developed over the years to do different things on the phone system. Payphones, for instance, were a lot of fun because they used the same in-band signaling to report whether or not you had put money in the machine. See, the phone company has to know when you've paid for a call at the payphone so that it can connect your call on the other end. The way that it does that is by playing tones from the payphone when you drop change into the coin slot. Now, it turns out you can actually hear those tones on some payphones, and people would record them using a tape recorder and then just play them back into the phone later, and it would sound to the phone company like you'd drop change in and they'd let you connect your call for free. That was called a red box. Put a nickel in the slot and the phone would make this sound. Put a dime in there and it'd sound like this. And if you put a quarter in the slot, it'd make a sound like this. If you went up to a payphone and played those sounds into the actual handset, then you would get free calls because as far as the phone company knew, you'd paid for them. Now, if someone called you from a payphone, you might want to get out a box called the green box. And what the green box did was it played tones that the phone company used to control the payphone. And a lot of it had to do with manipulating the coin collection mechanism. For instance, you could play a tone to collect more coins. You could also play a tone to return a coin. And you could also do what's called a ringback. Obviously, this isn't an ordinary blue box because I was just able to play those red box and green box tones. So what is it? Well, I just built this thing a couple days ago. It looks like a vintage blue box, complete with 2600 stickers and a little Captain Crunch action on the back there. But actually, inside is an Arduino microcontroller with a little bit of code that I've written that emulates a whole bunch of different boxes. It'll do beige box, red box, green box, blue box, silver box, which is the tones for the Autovan call priority system, as well as the 2600 hertz tone, and it'll even generate a dial tone just for fun. If you want to find out how I made this and get the code for yourself, then check out my recent post, Enter the Blue Box, on www.phrengineering.com. Well, I hope that was informative, and if you want to learn more about phone phreaking, then check out the book Exploding the Phone by Phil Lapsley, or check out the Phone Trips message board at www.wideweb.com/phonetrips. You can also go on YouTube and search Evan Doorbell, and you'll find some excellent recordings by one of the original phone phreaks of just excellent information and explanation on how he was doing all of these tricks on the phone. Well, that's it for today. Until next time, I'm Nick. Happy hacking.